It's time to take your business to the next level, the boss level. These are the premier business owner strategies and successes being utilized by the industry's top talent today. Rock your business like a boss, a VO boss. Now let's welcome your host, Ganguzza.
Okay, hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ganguzza, and I am here along with my special guest co-host, Mr. Tim Tippets, aka the VO Tech Guru, my good friend and amazing voiceover talent and audio engineer. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tim.
Oh, go on. No, really, go on. Go on. No, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
I am so excited I want you boss listeners out there to know that I have been after Tim to have him on the podcast for a very long time. And I am so thrilled that you are here because you are a wealth of information. And I'm so thankful for you and grateful for you to share with our listeners because I know they just want to hear everything audio that you have to say. So I think we should maybe start at the beginning. What do you think, Tim?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, talk about the importance of acoustics. And by the way, for those bosses out there that don't know, Tim just recently completed building me an amazing studio. I know I've talked about it before, but in case it's your first time here listening, Tim just built me an amazing custom booth in my home, finished it in March, was it? Early March?
The Beast.
Yeah,
the Beast.
The Beast, yes, affectionately termed the Beast. So yeah, Tim, let's talk a little bit about acoustics and why it's so important, obviously, for us in our industry.
Well, they're mega important. I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot lately, unfortunately, is people coming to me for help with a pretty clear misunderstanding of what good acoustics are. And that's okay because they don't know what they don't know, but to give you examples of what I mean, you've seen a lot of people on YouTube using like 2-inch foam, right?
Yes.
That somehow translates into that'll be good for my VO booth. And that's not true. So like, and for instance, what did you start out with when you first started doing VO?
Well, I started recording like in my closet back in the very beginning. And then after that, I hunted around and tried to build my own booth. And then my father helped me. And then we ended up with like moving blankets, carpet, moving blankets. And then we just tried to add things on top of it so that we could have some good absorption material. But like I said, back in those days, I wasn't really aware of what I was doing or even knew what I needed at the time.
Right. But at what point did you determine that you were going to need something else? Did someone give you feedback? Or?
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh. Okay. I got feedback and I was mortified. I remember one of my first auditions that I sent in, it was like, it sounds like you're talking in a hollow tube. There's a lot of echo here. You're going to have to fix that. And I was
That's a great jumping off point because the thing about 2-inch foam that people don't understand is that it only handles early reflections and high frequencies. It does not do a good job of absorbing the lower frequencies in the voice. And since we all voice essentially inside of boxes, that box is going to talk back to the mic, right? Like you can imagine if I had a box that I was voicing in and I kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking that box, right? What's going to happen if my head's inside that box and that mic is in there with me and that box gets really, really close to my head? Well, then it's going to sound super boxy.
Yeah.
Right?
It's going to be hot.
It's as plain as that.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
But so I want to be clear about something though, because I don't want people getting the wrong idea about this. I have not only auditioned for, but I've executed projects for, and I voiced for a lot of the usual suspects. But, when you're doing VO and you've got a fairly high-end client, you want to be in the best possible situation that you can be in.
Absolutely.
Now, what I've done, because I had no other choice, is I've actually taken my car, drove away to a really quiet area, and my car has fabric seats. And I took my 416, my Sennheiser, and voiced, and it sounded great. But that's because I knew what I was doing, right? And acoustics in a lot of cars aren't really that bad. Of course, you have glass and all that other kind of stuff, but if you position yourself correctly, you can get yourself sounding pretty decent. Now, in a closet, what'll end up happening is, and we all know this, we hear surround yourself with clothes. Okay. Well, what exactly does that mean? I've seen people put it in the corner, they'll go one angle and then the other, and they'll voice in that direction. But then they have a wooden floor.
Yes.
They have a door that's right next to them. They've got a ceiling that's not treated, right? And so
Well,
we're hearing the room talk back.
my first
Right.
closet didn't
Mhm.
have clothing in it. It was like a storage closet, and it had
Oh,
shelves in it. And so I said, "Okay, I can hang blankets." Well,
yeah.
that didn't work very well. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we talk about blankets, like Vocal Booth To Go makes the best blankets on the market that I've found, vocalbooth2go.com. And by the way, they are sponsors of mine, full transparency. And if anyone wants those blankets, VO Tech Guru -symbol and then the numeral 5. And I don't know if that can be dropped anywhere. It probably can't because
Sure.
it's a podcast.
We'll put that on our
But
show notes.
it's better than nothing. And they're real great people over there. It saves you 5%, right? But the point is I've been to the testing labs with these guys over at Riverbank here. It's near me, actually, in Geneva. And the performance that they got out of those blankets was absolutely astounding. In fact, I've heard many PVC booths, DIY PVC booths, where they use those blankets and they sound better than $7,000 or $8,000 professional modular booths.
Well, I have to say, when you were here building my custom booth and I was able to try out a Vocal Booth To Go, I have to say those blankets, they're luxury.
Yeah.
They're so
Yeah.
heavy, and they really, really worked well for me up in our loft area. And I was able to continue working, which is so important, while you were here for, a couple of weeks building my own booth. And I had a lot of work to do. I needed to continue working. So it was it was a lifesaver for me. So yeah,
Well, I'll
those
tell you-
blankets are amazing.
Yeah, and when I got in there, I'm going to be honest with you, even though I knew the blankets performed as well as they do, you have this massive vaulted
Oh, yeah.
foyer, right?
Yes, I do.
And this
16
thing
foot.
is, and this thing is sitting right at the top of the stairs, right where that massive volume is.
Yep.
And I couldn't believe we weren't hearing that.
I know.
That like really blew my mind. As much as I believed in the product, I mean, come on, we're talking about a massive vaulted space.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we didn't hear it, I was just like, okay, well, I don't know what to say. But to get on point with this, it's what ends up happening with some of these modular booths is they were originally built for musicians, right? I mean, the idea was you could play guitar or trumpet or whatever, and the sound of the sound mitigation, in other words, sound coming in and out. They do a pretty darn good job, especially the double layer and the triple layer booths, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for an instrument, like if I played guitar in a booth that had just 2-inch foam, I'd be okay with that. And I have. I'll do it out here in my control room where I'm voicing right now, for instance. I'll just, take my guitar and play away and have no problem with the acoustics. But if I voice, to give you an example, like if I'm too far away from this mic, let me show you what I mean. Okay, I sound very different now. You can hear the entire room. But this room is meant to be live. This room is meant to be live because I need to mix. I compose for film and TV in here at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also listen to you guys, right?
Right.
When you send me samples and I'm creating presets. So the thing is that when you take 2-inch foam and you put it inside of a box, aka a booth, what ends up happening is it absorbs the high frequencies, but then you have a lot of low frequencies hanging around, and they're not being absorbed by that 2-inch foam. Blankets, for instance, will cover a very large spectrum. They'll keep the room from what we call booming, right? Which is, and this is especially true where you have booths that are equidistance, 4x4, 6x6. These are problems if you don't have really good acoustics, because that equidistance, the sound is hitting the walls at the same time and coming back towards the mic, and it's creating what's called a standing wave. And to give you an idea of what that might sound like, something along the lines of woo, 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 like that. Okay, it's just this kind of like, this sound in the background where you're like, geez, it just sounds tubby or whatever. People use a lot of different terms. Boxy, they'll use honk, especially musicians, right?
Now, can I just ask a question? Is that like sometimes what the problems are with these portable kind of box booths or things that you put on your desktop? Because I know I've tried those, and it's really hard to get a good sound sometimes unless you're perfectly positioned. And the only time I was able to perfectly position myself was, I don't know, I had my head like practically in it, and it just was too hot. It just was really difficult to get the right sound.
I understand what you mean by that. So the intent there is not to have a VOMO, for instance, VOMO, again, Vocal Booth To Go, as your main booth. I do know some people who use it, but they also have rooms where it's either one, very quiet, or two, they have a lot in there that's otherwise absorbing things that might make its way out of the booth. Now, the Vomo, which sits on a desktop or you can put it on a tripod, for instance, does a fantastic job on its own. In fact, I've tested it in a bathroom with tile and was blown away by the results. Couldn't believe how much it was able to knock down my voice. Because the deeper your voice is, the more low frequency you have, the more power is going to be thrust outside of that, right? And into the room. And then it's going to try to get back in. So you're right about two things. One is it can get hot. If you're doing long form stuff,
Yes.
But normally when I travel with my Vomo, I'm normally going to be doing an audition or something. That's not to say I haven't knocked out jobs. When we were at VO Atlanta, like the couple times ago at the airport, right? Oddly enough, I was in room 747, which was bizarre, but I actually took out the Vomo and knocked out a job there. And not only that, I knocked out the voiceover for my presentation that day. And it sounded fantastic, okay? But we're not talking about audiobooks here.
Right.
We're not talking about a permanent situation. It's meant to be a mobile voiceover booth, which is in the name Vomo itself, right? The M is for mobile, from what I understand. Now, that being said, in a pinch, will it work? Absolutely. No question about it. But you do need to understand that tool just like you would any other tool, right? And you and I have talked about this with mic positioning.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And getting you in the right position relative to the acoustics around you. That's super important. Again, earlier, the listeners can hear me pull my mic away. Well, I was actually hang loose away from the mic. And as well treated as this room is, I mean, Ann, it has panels, 4-inch thick panels everywhere. It still is not going to get the job done. But with proper mic technique, along with, decent acoustics, you can get up on the mic. And I've done jobs for Volvo, Mercedes-Benz from right here, right? So it can be done. But it depends on the type of read that I'm doing. So sometimes I'll head into my booth and get on the 103, but that's a super sensitive mic.
Right,
and that won't handle this room, right? It'll hear everything. So anyway, so the 2-inch foam thing is something that's really been bothering me as of late because of the last 5 months and the crisis, the pandemic. I've had just a tidal wave of people coming after me. And it's something that they've always either wanted to do or they're forced to do because they're working talent and now they need to get their studio together. And so, of course, they're searching YouTube and they're trying to find any answers that they can. And hey, I love it. I mean, get aggressive and figure it out so that you can work. But there's also a lot of misinformed people out there who are using 2-inch foam and other things. Like I've even seen videos, there are plenty of them, where they have this unfolding IKEA 1x1 kind of cube. And then they'll put foam inside of that, like all four sides and then the back, and then voice into it and think they're good to go. Well, here's the problem. Your voice is not contained inside that box, number one. It's going to travel outside of the box. It's going to hit all the walls around you. And then the front of that mic is going to pick up whatever's coming back to the box.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people believe, because they don't have contrast, right? And I'm not putting them down. Again, you don't know what you don't know, okay? But how would you know? Like I like to use this analogy. So, man, if I asked you, do you know what chocolate tastes like? And you said, yeah, sure, I've had a Hershey's bar, right? and then I take you to France.
Or
apologies 25. To Jerry. Jerry can come along if he wants to. but if I take you to Paris to some cafe and I buy you some like really high end, French-made dessert with chocolate in it, you're going to taste it and go, oh, that's what chocolate is.
That's chocolate, yes.
Right.
Well,
when you taste a Hershey's bar again, you're going to go, yeah, we're not doing that anymore, right? And it's the same thing with acoustics, because you don't know what you don't know until you have something contrasting, and then you listen to what it is that you used to do. That's the aha moment.
Well, I will tell you that prior to you building my booth here, I did have 2-inch acoustic panels that I had in my room, and I also in my booth I had 2-inch, if I remember correctly, and you installed 4-inch at least everywhere in my booth and outside of my booth, and you also did something different too is you kind of removed it from the wall. So it makes sense now that when you tell me that the sound is going into it and then going past it and then trying to come back.
Right.
So it makes sense that you installed them slightly off the wall, and it has made a huge difference between the 2 and the 4-inch. So it's incredible,
absolutely.
the difference.
Yeah, that's another thing about for those of you who are interested in getting some of these, building them for around $25 a piece, go to VOTech Guru on YouTube. I have a video. It's a DIY. For those of you who will brave it, it's really not that difficult. It's not as difficult as it looks. But you can get them for about $25 a piece. They are fully transparent from back to front. You get them off the wall just a little bit, and you get a lot more performance out of them. Now, the 2-inch acoustic panels you're talking about, they have plywood on the back.
Yes, they
right?
do. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the problem with that. If that sound is not allowed to travel through the panel to hit the wall and then try to come back out, all it's doing is it's hitting 2 inches of acoustic treatment, hitting that plywood, and you're giving it a much quicker round trip.
Oh yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I forgot that too, that they have plywood on the back. Mm.
Yeah, especially if it's not away from the wall, right? Because now your wall isn't doing anything to kind of help diffuse things that are traveling around inside, because that's one of the reasons we get them off the wall too, okay? So like as an example, when you're doing these podcasts, since we don't see each other right now, I can't see you can't see me. How far away would you say you are from the mic right now?
I'm going to say maybe 10 fingers away.
Okay, 10 fingers. Okay, so that's more than hang loose, okay?
Oh yeah, that's more than hang loose.
But see, the kind of booth that you have, like when I recently did a thing for Bazooka. You remember Bazooka gum?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They've got this new candy brand called Rattlers or something. And so I play this animated moose. And it's definitely the most dynamic read I've ever done, because I come in with this really growly, the stuff that I get hired for. Low, growly, kind of, whiskey voice, right? Except it's a candy for kids. And then at one point, this moose that I'm the voice for now, he yells bazooka, but just really, really loud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I had to do that one in my booth. I didn't have any choice, right? So when you have proper acoustics like what you have there, you can get 10 fingers away.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. And it's funny because today I'm sitting with my back completely straight up against the chair. And so it makes me not as close to the mic as I could be. I mean, if I rolled up here, Tim, and now you can definitely tell a bit of difference here, right?
Yeah.
But I also
more
feel
warmth.
like more warmth in there. And so the cool thing is that I can kind of vary my distance in this room and not feel like the room is going to attack me back.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The attack of the booth. I love
the
it.
attack of the booth.
Yeah. So really, acoustics are the make or break. Okay. And so what I like to say is, since I cast from time to time, and I believe you cast as well.
Mm-hmm. I do.
So I'm sure you can verify this. So let's use 100 people and let's kind of break this down. So as an audio engineer myself, and most of these people are qualifying the audio before they send it on to the producer anyway, especially on the higher end projects, right? Because no audio guy in his, right mind, his or her right mind, is going to say, hey, here's some super crappy audio. What do you think, right? So the buckets that I sort them in are this. The first 80 of those 100 auditions, we'll use percentages. The first 80%, they're just going in the trash. I know that's harsh for anyone listening.
Because of acoustics.
Right, but that's the reality. Well, it's either the acoustics or something that they learned off of YouTube. Hey, here's how to get your voiceover sounding great. Okay, well, great for what? Like, a radio spot, or, what are we talking about? So it's too generalized, first of all. So 80% of those are going in the trash for several reasons. It may be a really bad read. It might be really bad acoustics, just really bad EQ, whatever. Now, between 80 and 90% is what I call the wince zone, because I listen to them and it makes me wince, right? I go, ooh, too bad, so close, right? Because either the audio isn't quite what it needs to be, but the read is awesome, or vice versa. And then you have the 90 to 100%, okay? These are the 10% that get 90% of the work that people talk about, right?
Yep,
but there's a reason why. I mean, when your audio is pristine and you're right for the read, then you're going to land jobs. So here's what I've heard in a lot of forums many times. I'm sure you've seen it. People will say, well, there are 100 auditions there. Why would I even try? Well, for me, when I head into an audition, First of all, I see 10 people. That's number one, because I'm floating in the 90 to 100 band, and I know that
you've got the acoustics, you've got the good audio.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right. So I know I'm only dealing with 10 people now, because the market has responded to me over time and told me what it wants from me, which is usually something inspirational or some form of badassery. Right. It's usually going to be one of the two. Okay. Since I choose my jobs correctly when I do audition, if it says something like, we want real American grit, I now know that I'm one of 3 people. Does that make sense? Okay. And so when I see 100, I'm not afraid at all.
Right.
So it is that important. So think about this. If you can get to that 90 to 100 just by handling your space, getting your EQ together, and we'll have the conversation about EQ and compression and downward expansion, blah, blah, blah. Don't want to make anyone go to sleep right now. But right now, probably the best thing that anyone listening can do if you're questioning your acoustics is to take a duvet or some other really thick blanket, put it over you and your mic, and voice.
Yeah.
Okay? Then pull it off. Now make sure you're covering yourself entirely. Okay? And then pull that blanket off of you, or the duvet cover. We want something thick. We're thinking like catcher's mitt here for the sound. Okay?
Sure.
Pull it off, talk again, and then see what it sounds like. And then it will answer your question about whether your acoustics are good or not.
Well, you know what's so interesting about that is that every time I would go traveling, the only way that I could voice something that was even acceptable to give as an audition was if I literally put that comforter up over me and made a tent. You know, and that's the only way. And I can't tell you how many times I tried to not do that. And before I realized that I really do need to have that I need to have that blanket up and over me before I could really produce anything that was worthy of listening to. So that makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, Joe Cipriano does it all the time. I mean, the guy's flipping MacGyver. In fact, he calls this MacGyvering when he goes to a hotel, and I've done the same thing too. I call it the sip tent. But what he does, and you guys, you should go online and look up Joe Cipriano and ironing board sound booth, and you'll see pictures of him. He's laying down on a bed. He's waiting. He's listening to the session. He's got his stuff there inside with the Apollo, and he's waiting to voice. So what he does is if you look at the pictures, he puts something on the desk to absorb. He puts pillows on the side. The ironing board is propped up. He has something on top that he pulls over the back of him. And I've been there when he's taught, because I set up some presets for him to match his studio. Okay. And those guys, when he was at VO Atlanta, in fact, at the time, and he said, "Can you come in real quick on Skype or Zoom, whatever it was?" And so he then voiced something. I think it was Star Wars, and then Disney, and then something for Kiss FM. And then he asked them, "How does it sound, guys?" And they said, "Perfect as always, Joe."
There you go.
So you can do it. It's just a matter of understanding what needs to be done, and it's really not that hard to understand what needs to be done. And by the way, I have some resources at VOTechGuru.com for anyone who wants to check that out. And if you need some help with this, I do offer 15-minute consultations. They're free for now. Okay. You can reach me at info@VOTechGuru.com, and I'd be happy to talk to you about your needs and what it is that you're dealing with, and so we can move you forward.
And hands down, I recommend, obviously, recommend talking to Tim for sure. And so you guys, acoustics. We have so many more things that we're going to talk about in our next episodes. But Tim, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL, which allows us to connect like bosses to one another. Tim and I are actually in completely different locations. Me in Southern California, and Tim is in a different state.
We're voice distancing.
We are
for safety.
There you go, voice distancing. So if you guys want to find out more, you can check them out at IPDTL.com. You guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye. You can say bye, Tim.
Oh, bye.
Join us next week for another edition of VO Boss with your host, Ann Ganguzza. And take your business to the next level. Sign up for our mailing list at voboss.com and receive exclusive content, industry revolutionizing tips and strategies, and new ways to rock your business like a boss. Redistribution with permission, coast-to-coast connectivity via IPDTL.